Hi, friends. It's Taylor from Doomed to Fail. We're the podcast that brings you history's most notorious disasters and epic failures twice a week, every week. But for the past year, we've been bringing you 3 episodes a week, or sometimes even more if we're on vacation, because we've been re releasing our first 26 episodes. Those episodes, we did one really long episode with 2 stories in it, and then we decided to divide it in half and do 2 episodes a week. So, in that vein, we re released all 26 of our first episodes as 2 separate parts, and this is our very last re release. So, this has been exhausting to do this. I've recut 26 episodes into 52 separate episodes, redone all the socials, uploaded it to Simplecast, redone the YouTube videos, just done the whole thing. And I am both excited that it's over and also worried that we don't have endless content to give you all. But hopefully, our new episodes will be fulfilling and great. As that is our goal. If you have any ideas for us, please let us know. We're at doomtofailpod@gmail.com. We have a new website, doomtofailpod.com, and we are on all the socials at doomtofailpod. So with no further ado, I guess, this is episode 26, part 2 on the life and death of Vincent van Gogh. And this is one of my absolute favorite episodes that we have ever done. I learned so much about Van Gogh, despite, as I probably mentioned, being an art history major in college. I learned so much more about Van Gogh from reading a very, very long book about him, and learning a lot about his life via various articles in the internet and such. But a very troubled man, a very troubled life. He, like, as you know, he didn't know that we were all going to love it, but I'm so glad that we do. And I hope that somewhere in the universe, in the stardust, he knows that he is beloved across the world. Since this episode aired, I went to Japan in April 2024, and I saw a Van Gogh in a museum in Hiroshima. So he is, all over, and we definitely, definitely love him. And also shout out to the hero of the story, who is Vincent van Gogh's sister-in-law, Yo van Gogh. It is because of Yo that we know about Vincent, and definitely stick around because there's some really fun stories of her, owning a boarding house that had like sunflowers in the dining room. Just unbelievable work that she did to make sure that we know about Vincent today. So thank you to Vincent van Gogh for sharing your vision with us, and thank you to Yo van Gogh for making sure that we did not forget about Vincent and his life. So I hope you enjoyed this very, very last re-release, episode 26, part 2, The Life and Death of Vincent van Gogh. Thank you.
In the matter of the people of the state of California versus Orenthal James Simpson, case number BA096.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
I'm muted. I bet you could have heard me peeing, but I just like to mute it just in case.
Just in case.
I know
It's always good
I
to
pee,
say.
I pee in a totally different room, but just in case.
I thought there was a bucket next to your computer.
Oh God. Like, you remember when you were like, "Oh, I'd like a chamber pot." And I was like, "Absolutely." Okay, I'm ready. Hold on. No, I'm not talking about Russia today, first, but I am talking about something that does have a little bit of a true crime bit in it in the end. So that was unexpected. So I'm excited to tell you about that. I was thinking, we talk about relationships. Like, what's a dramatic thing that happened in a relationship? And then I was thinking, like, do you remember how I have this extremely expensive degree in art history
Oh yeah.
that I'm still paying for?
And why
So
you?
like, yeah. So I'm like, what are some things in our history that seem super dramatic, and what is a story that we think we all know? So I thought, who was the person that caused Vincent van Gogh to cut off his ear?
Oh my God, that is so cool. Yeah, hell yeah.
And it's not at all what I thought. This is a frenetic, colorful, tragic story. It begs the question, like, do artists have to be starving? Do you have to be mentally ill? Does something have to be wrong for you to create like great art? So this is a wild ride of,
Can I
of
guess?
Vincent van Gogh's life. Yes.
It's gonna be a cousin. It'll be something gross. It's a cousin, isn't it?
No, it's not even a woman, and it's not sexual.
Weird.
So I'll tell you more. Also, I know that were I a Dutch speaker, I would say Van Gogh and not Van Gogh, but I can't do it.
I'm not doing that. I'm not doing
I
that.
can't, no.
I don't like.
Um,
It's like when people say guacamole when they're trying to say. It's like just say guacamole, man. Like I get that you speak a language I can't speak, and I'm really proud of you. But like, you don't have to big up me. Just call it guacamole.
I mean, I think
You know who I'm thinking about, right, Taylor?
no. Tell me later.
Yeah, I'll tell you later.
I imagine. But I do think that once Dan Carlin does if he does anything on Van Gogh, I'll say Van Gogh because I'll say whatever Dan Carlin says. But until
Do
then,
that.
I'm going to say Van Gogh because that's what I came up with. So I'm going to tell you about the many failed relationships of Vincent van Gogh, starting with his parents, his brother Theo, God, a sex worker named Cien, his cousin Kay, the art world in general, an artist named Paul Gauguin, and ultimately himself. So
His year.
all failed. We are both older than Vincent van Gogh will ever be. He died when he was 37.
Wow.
And we have things that he so desperately wanted and never had. We have good friendships, we have loving families, we have homes, I have children. Someday you might have children, who knows? But like Vincent
Sorry.
van Gogh so desperately wanted this family and he will never have them. But in 100 years, no one will remember us, you know?
That's
And
not.
people will,
What about this
mm,
podcast?
uh-huh. So yeah, no, it's interesting and I think the tragedy that we all know is like he wasn't famous in his lifetime, sure, and he was, this tortured artist, and he totally was. But he had this wild need to be accepted and loved and to express himself, and like that was what ultimately like led to his death. In March 1987, Van Gogh's painting, A Vase with 15 Sunflowers, was sold for an adjusted $94.21 million. And that tripled the last painting ever sold before that. So it was like a new era of art. So like Van Gogh obviously is like everyone knows him. You can see his art. You know exactly what he does. You can think about it. You like picture it immediately.
Yeah, I
Um,
went to the Van Gogh. There's in Austin. They set up a Van Gogh.
the
It's called Van
immersive thing.
Gogh. The experience. Van Gogh experience
hmm
is what it's called. It
I
was
did
like
it in Las Vegas. Yeah.
yeah, it's cool.
Yeah. I mean, he's everywhere. And Wikipedia's list of the top 89 most expensive paintings, I don't know why I was 89 on that list, ever sold, 11 of them are his.
Yeah,
So 11 of like the top, most expensive paintings ever sold are his. He only sold one in his last year of his life. So he only saw one that he had sold. Did you ever watch Doctor Who?
I've seen a few episodes. I'm not like a huge Doctor Who. I know what a TARDIS is.
So perfect. So there's one, and I've only seen this clip, but it's a beautiful clip where they get Van Gogh and they take him to an exhibit in like 2010, and they ask the docent to tell them like, what is it about Van Gogh? And he goes off and he talks, says he's one of the greatest artists that ever lived, and Van Gogh starts crying, and it's just like beautiful and like very lovely. But in his life, he never knew. So again, like, I spent this week on a topic that people spend their whole lives doing. So I'm definitely gonna like miss things and there's definitely more to this story, but it's such a good story. So the thing that I read was the book Van Gogh, The Life by Stephen Nakafe and Gregory White Smith. So that's the book that I read. And then I also have some like art history books from when I was in college that I looked at as well. And then also just to mention, this is post-impressionism. If you were like, where are we with this? Well, one more thing that I don't maybe gonna say for the end, but I just want to add now because it's fun, is there is a missing Van Gogh. It is called Poppy Flowers. It was stolen from the Mohammed Mahmoud Khalil Museum in Cairo twice. It was stolen in the 80s and it was stolen again in 2010, and no one knows where it is,
That's pretty
which is
cool.
pretty cool and pretty fun. So let's talk about him himself. Vincent van Gogh was born on March 30th, 1853 in Groot-Zundert, Netherlands. So there's a lot of words that I'm not going to be able to pronounce because they're Dutch and French coming at you. Just FYI.
You just reminded me that I actually went to his actual museum when I went to Amsterdam.
Cool.
Yeah, it was really cool. He does a lot of like lithographs. There was like a lot of like,
Yes.
never, yeah, okay. It stuck in my mind of like I didn't know that guy. I thought he's a painter only, and I guess no.
He did thousands of works. There's so much Van Gogh stuff. It's crazy. Yeah. His parents, Theodorus van Gogh and his mother, Anna. His dad was a minister of the Dutch Reformed Church, so they were Protestant in a very Catholic area. It was a very family first family. His mom was very strict, wanted the family to be together and be happy. This is also like a weird time in the Netherlands. They are think about nature a lot, think about the garden, they think about flowers. They have this idea that people have all the time that there is this glorious past that we have to go back to, that we have to remember. And they're remembering times when the Netherlands was really successful, and they're enchanted by that. They're enchanted by the past. And we talked a little bit about that in like the Tulip Mania
Yeah.
episode, when people were like first becoming to be middle class and starting to like get money, and people like had a lot. It was a very prosperous time for them, but also it was because of slavery that they were
Right.
so successful. So they know that by this time,
Things
they're
are
like
so easy when other people do all the work for you for
100,
free.
yeah, exactly. So they, have this memory of a time where things were great, but they also don't want to remember the fact that they were great because they enslaved people,
Right.
obviously.
Right.
Vincent himself was the oldest surviving brother of 6 children. A brother was born the year before him, exactly a year before him, whose name was also Vincent van Gogh. But then the brother died stillborn, and then Vincent was born a year later, which is like maybe weirder for us than it was for them, but still kind of
It's a
weird.
little weird.
I don't love it. Yeah. And
It's
his
it's like
mother
his parents were still
just
mourning the
just
dead
like started
one
over.
to name this one Vince. That's
It's a little
whatever.
weird.
Whatever.
Yeah, I don't love it.
Different times.
Yeah. So his parents kept having kids. His mom actually had her last kid at 47, which I think is
Nice.
interesting, kind of old. So his family read a lot. They loved reading Dickens. They loved reading fairy tale books, things like that. They read a book. This isn't really important, but one of the authors that they liked was a man named Edward Bulwer Lytton, who I've never heard of, but he was the first person to ever write "It was a dark and stormy night,"
Oh, nice.
which is kind of fun. I guess someone had to write that for the first time, and I don't know anything else about him, but it's fun that he was the first person to write that. Another big thing in the Van Gogh family is they would make each other gifts. So they loved Christmas. Imagine like, you know, a Dutch Christmas. There's, a lot of like candles and ribbons and flowers, and they would make each other presents. So they would crochet things and collage things, and always just like a really
That's
loving
lovely.
family. The dad's 3 mantras were duty, decency, and solidity. So fate has ups and downs. Choose the middle, like just like do the middle path, which that's not at all what his children did. But that's what he was like
What's
trying to force upon them.
solid? Solid. What does that mean?
And what I wrote is, yeah, I wrote fate has ups and downs, but you choose the middle. Like you stand strong in the middle. So like when a good thing happens, don't forget that bad things happen.
Wait,
And when a
that's what
bad thing
solidity
happens,
means?
well, to them, yes. So when a bad thing happens, don't forget that something good will happen eventually, like this too shall pass stuff. But also when something good is happening, don't forget that something bad can happen any moment.
I'm such an idiot. I typed salinity and I was like, the dissolved salt of content in bodies of water.
Really salty water is our third family virtue. I don't know why, it just is. But that made it hard, obviously, for the kids to be themselves. Because your parents are like, failure's always around the corner. You're gonna have a weird life.
Right.
Him and his mom did not get along very well. He did a lot of art. He would send things to her. She would throw it away. She was like, ugh,
Yikes.
this
Yikes.
this jerk kid of mine. His dad was very religious, and so that definitely had an impact on Vincent's life. Eventually, they sent him to a boarding school because he was a lot to deal with. He was very like he would read a ton and do all this art and do all these things, but he never really fit in anywhere. And so his parents were like, "You're kind of making this family crazy." So, everybody else is like following the rules, going to school, living like a relatively like normal life for a preacher's children, and Vincent like can't do that. He's kind of all over the place. So they send him away. He goes to several different boarding schools. He still doesn't fit in. So they're trying to figure out, what do we do with this, like our oldest son, who's kind of, we're gonna have to like support him forever because he can't figure his shit out, essentially.
I would encourage that and be like, the ones that don't fit in are the ones that do cool shit. So
Yeah, he's
that's
about to do
me.
cool shit for sure. The Van Gogh family actually was very successful in two ways. They were successful in gold and successful in art. So it's not crazy that Vincent would be an artist. There's an art family. His dad is a preacher because his dad was. So it was like several generations of like going right back to your exact dad, whatever, like that line was
Yeah.
preachers, but everybody else was like in the art world. His uncles are art dealers. So they're people who are like telling everybody what to like in art during this time in big cities, like in Paris, in London, like all over Europe. His dad also, to note, did have a fun time in university before he got married, and then he decided to become more pious. So he at least he had like a little bit of personality in there. But right now, also there's this crazy thing happening where there's a new book called The Life of Jesus that came out, and it for the first time in these guys' life, they're seeing Jesus as potentially a real person and not like as the Son of God. So it's kind of throwing a wrench into things. So it's kind of a crazy time to be involved in religion. But Vincent decides that they're like he needs to get out of the house. He won't go to school. He keeps walking home from school. So he had an uncle named Vincent van Gogh, and this uncle was called Cent. So Cent is this uncle's nickname for Vincent. And he's an art dealer. So he made money in an art store. He was a very fun guy.
I'm
He,
confused. Hold on. His uncle was named Vincent van Gogh,
yeah, he was
and
named after his
his
uncle, the
name
Vincent in the
is
family.
okay.
But the uncle's a Vincent van Gogh, but his nickname is Cent. So we're just gonna call him
Call
Cent.
him son. Okay, cool. Yeah.
Yeah. And so Cent is one of the first people who started to see, like you were saying with the lithographs, like art that's like reproducible and people want to see to get prints. So he would sell prints. He sold prints in The Hague and he became very rich. And Uncle Cent was not able to have children with his wife. So his wife and him just like worked together and they brought Vincent on as sort of like, a family, maybe a son figure who can work with them. And Vincent was 16 when he went to work in Scent's store in The Hague. He's the worst at work. So do you ever like go into a niche store and there's like a nerd there that you just like don't want to talk to?
That would usually be me at like GameStop.
I was gonna say like at GameStop. Like, yes. So imagine he's like the nerdiest dude at the GameStop, and people are like trying to just go in and like buy art and like do these things, and he's kind of freaking out about everything. He's like, "You should buy this because it's this, and this is this," and he's like, "This applies to this poem, applies to this book, applies to this thing," and he just has so much going on in his head that when you talk to him, you're like overwhelmed, and people are like, "No, thank you." So they kind of like back out of the store slowly and like don't want to buy anything. So they send him to the back of the store because they're like, "You can't talk to
You're too
customers
weird,
anymore."
bud. You're way
Yeah.
too weird.
Sorry, bro. He moves there when he's 16. By 19, he's in very, very much in the scene of going to brothels all the time. He spends a lot of time with sex workers, sometimes just to talk, sometimes like other things, but like something weird happens during this time where they're just like, you gotta cut that out. Like you can't do it anymore. Like it wasn't like
Who's they? The sex workers tell him to cut it out?
no, his Uncle Cent and like the
Oh,
people at the store
okay.
because of something that happened in the brothels. I don't know exactly what it was, but like everybody knew that he had like maybe like freaked out on someone. You know what I mean? Like he did something and everybody
Jeez.
was like uncomfortable around him. So like you gotta go. So I sent him to London
Dude,
to
so he
another
just sounds like an
store.
autistic kid.
Yes, he definitely, absolutely. There's so much mental illness that like we would think about differently. And I'll tell you actually like what they know he had later. But yeah,
Okay.
like something's up. His brother, he had a younger brother named Theo. Theo's 5 years younger than him. Theo was sent to a similar job in Brussels, and he did great. Theo's great. He's personable. Everybody likes him. He is always the one that will financially support Vincent for his whole life. So Vincent's whole life, he will ask Theo for money, and Theo will send him money, while Theo is selling other people's art. And he's doing fine. Theo does fine. Vincent gets sent to London to work in the same company, but in a stockroom, and he was bummed. He, didn't want to be in London. London was like really dirty and gross, and like so many more people than he was used to seeing, and like he didn't know if he loved it, and he felt very like isolated and alone. Another thing that happens during this time, which I think is crazy, is because he wasn't doing very well, he was about to get drafted into the military, and the military was going to send him to Sumatra to like fight in like a war there that they were having. And he got out of it. His parents paid 600 guilders, which is a year's salary, to send a bricklayer in his place.
That is privilege.
Yeah. And his dad was kind of like, hey, I sent him this money, but also like, yeah, he wasn't going to send him to Sumatra to do that. So he sent some poor bricklayer in his place. But Vincent will always be a financial burden to his family, like always. And he's always trying to find another like that family feeling he had when he was younger before people started to try to like get rid of him in certain ways. So while he's in London, he meets a family, like a woman and a widow and her daughter. He's like, this is my new family. We're super happy. I like love it here. He invites his sister. His sister was like, it's weird. Like you're being weird. Like, why are you so obsessed with these people? And there's so many relationships he'll have where like they only last a month, but the first 2 weeks are like, this is the best thing that ever happened to me. This is it. This is my thing. And then the last 2 weeks are awful, and then he leaves and never talks about it again. And it happens
Yeah.
over and over.
Again,
So
autism. like,
yeah,
like it's just obviously like he just has like a disconnect from whatever. We know
yeah.
it's all good. You'll discuss it.
But yeah, no, exactly that. Like he has a disconnect. Like in his head, he's like seeing things differently than everybody else is seeing.
Right.
You know,
Right.
he's like absorbing all this literature, all these stories, all this art, and it's just like he cannot express it in a way that isn't crazy. You know, people
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
he's like, ah, and people are like, you gotta calm down. Like
Right.
you,
Right.
we can't do this. He decided that he was super lonely. He didn't know what to do, so he turned to God. He was like, "My dad is a pastor, preacher, whatever. I want to do the same." So during this time, also he was in Paris when the Impressionists were making their move. So like the ones that you know, like Monet is doing his thing, and he missed it. He doesn't write about it. Because again, like most of the people I talk about, we know about him through his letters, and he missed it because he was going into this like religious fervor, being like, I can be the best preacher out there, you know? And
But then he also missed it because Monet wasn't famous when he was
no, he
there.
was in a way that it was like they were trying to be disruptive. So you would have heard of
Okay.
him, you
Okay.
know? Like maybe the people weren't like, he's amazing and like they're putting water lilies in their house, but they were like, he's being disruptive. So you,
There's
you would
something
have known.
here. Yeah.
Yeah. So he also, just like I put like Putin, because, you know, I guess speaking of Putin, he has this romanticized idea of the past, which Putin does as well. So Putin looks at Catherine the Great and says, like, there was this time in Russian history where we were the best. And that isn't true because horrible things were happening all over the country, but he wants to like be a part of that past. And
Right.
so Vincent always thought, like, I want to be a part of like the French Revolution. Like I was born too late. So he is very lonely. He gets fired from his job in London. He goes home for Christmas. Christmas is again a huge deal. People complained about him. They wanted to act like nothing had happened. They just like kind of wanted him to go away. So also, I guess also back to Russia. Of course, I mentioned Russia like
Of
9 times in
course.
this. Just like Rasputin, Vincent went for a walk for a really long time.
There you go.
So he went for a walk for months. He would walk for days along the countryside, just like walking around kind of preaching, not doing much art, but like, you know, really like reading the Bible and becoming very, very religious. He finally got a small job at a church in London. So he's walking around England. He gets a job in London. He speaks English. So he speaks English, Dutch, French, but his English is very heavily accented and he's super excited. So people are just like, what is this? As he's like preaching in the thing. He's very passionate. He's very strange. No one thinks he's going to be a preacher, which is also really hurtful. You know, like his family's like, yeah, you're doing something that like a lot of us have done, but we don't think you're gonna be successful.
But it's also it makes him so much less cool to me. I didn't know he was trying to be a preacher. Like he like lost so many cool points by trying to be a preacher. Like I
He
don't
gets him
know.
back. He gets him back.
Okay.
So now he's like walking around. He's smoking. He smokes constantly. Like he smokes a big pipe all the time. And he studies and studies and studies, but like he doesn't study the right way. You know, it's like he does that thing that he always feels like he needs a teacher, but he never finds a teacher that he will listen to. So he just like studies his own way, which doesn't give him the outcome that he wants, you
Right.
know? So that's like someone being like, I'm going to read the Bible 15 times, and that's how I'm going to become the most religious person of all time, you know? And you're like, okay, but you also have to like talk to people and like do other things, you know?
I have a joke in the chamber, and I'm not gonna.
No, do it. Go ahead.
No, I'm not gonna do it.
But are you going to do it eventually? Do it.
Let's just say there's other things the Catholic Church has done. You know what? I'm not doing it. Let's keep
All right,
going.
fine. Okay, fine. Well, he's not Catholic, he's Protestant, but he's an artist. He's an artist's heart, an artist's soul, but he's like, how do I express this? So he's trying to express it through religion. He throws himself into it 100%, and it doesn't work. So, meanwhile, Theo, his brother, even though he's successful in the art world, has a successful store, and like is doing well, he falls in love with some not as reputable ladies, and he gets someone pregnant, and his parents are like, absolutely not. So he has
He
to
had
like,
a prostitute pregnant, basically, is what you're
yes,
trying to say.
a sex.
Got it.
I think I don't know if she was like specifically a sex worker, but like someone who was poor. But he's definitely sleeping with a ton of sex workers. That's going to be Theo's lot in life. So he was getting super depressed, and that's happening kind of in the background. Like Theo's successful in work. Like he gets offered a job for like a shit ton of money, like more money than anyone had ever seen. And he, is doing he's very successful. He goes to the opera. He dresses really nice. Because another thing that Van Gogh's, the family was really into was like dressing really nice and going for walks on Sundays and everybody see them and being like, oh, they look nice. They have their shit together,
Yeah.
So Theo looks like he has his shit together when he does not have his shit together. Now Vincent's 25. He's hoping to become a preacher. He becomes a pastor to a poor mining village in Belgium, called the Borinage. And he's one of the people who, reads the Bible and interprets it as like, if you suffer, you're lucky. Like you're lucky because you're suffering. And so that was good because it was a mining town. And on April 17th, 1879, there was a huge fucking explosion and a ton of people died. It's a fucking mining town. He tried to like comfort people, and they were just like, absolutely not. Like
Because he's a weirdo.
yeah, like everyone we know just exploded. Like we can't with you. So he was there a month. And he kept trying to like be like, I'm also gonna suffer. He would like not eat for days. He'd walk for days. He wouldn't take care of his body because he was like, I have to suffer to like be religious.
He's
So now he's
trying way
like,
too hard.
he's trying way too fucking hard, you know? And so he gives up. He's like, I'm not a preacher. He becomes an atheist. It's over. So
Okay.
who
All
knows?
right.
Yeah. Whatever he really believed, he just wanted to like do something with passion. So he's like, I can put my passion into this. And that didn't work. It was like too much. So now he likes art. And he moves to Brussels. And he starts taking art classes. He spends money on nice clothes. He, tries to start a print collection, tries to make money from selling his collection. But again, like even if he is in art classes, he doesn't last very long. And even if he, dresses really nice, people are like, we can tell that you're weird. And like later, there's always tons of stories of people who like, they're asked 20, 30 years later, do you remember him? And they're like, yeah, we remember him. He was really fucking weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a weird guy, whatever. And he became obsessed with several artists, and he would like be like, I need to study under you. I need to like be a part, learn, teach me everything. And that would last like a month, just like everything. It'd be like super high, high, super low, low, over. And then he would like never talk to them again. He became obsessed with his cousin Kay, and he asked her to marry him. And she said, no, like absolutely not. She
I
said,
was kind of onto something when I thought it was a cousin that did this to him.
yeah, but this, I mean, this, I don't even know. He was like, oh, I really want to, he asked her to marry him, and she said, never, no, never, which is very dramatic
Yeah.
and not what you want to hear. And so he was like, I really want to see her. Like, he like tried to go and talk to his uncles and be like, I need to see her. And they were like, no, like, just absolutely not. So he had to like kind of like deal with that. Like, he was still trying to find this like family. He feels like he is a late bloomer, obviously. He meets more artists, an artist named Mauve. He meets for a while, but he never has enough money. He always gets in fights with people. He just like can't keep it together. The big thing that Theo keeps telling Vincent is you need to make saleable art. You need to be able to sell your shit. Like in the book, they say saleable art like 15 million times. Like this is the thing that you need to do, but he just can't do it. He knows art dealers, he knows artists, he knows what people are buying, and he just like cannot do it. He approaches art like he approached being a preacher. Like he's impossible to get along with because it's just like so into it and so in his head and produces this stuff that comes out like garbled and people don't get it,
Yeah.
you know? So one thing that he loved doing is he loved drawing people, and he insisted on drawing people from a model, like from having a person there. He couldn't really draw from his imagination. That was not something that he did. He stood in front of things and drew them. So he would spend all of his money on models. A lot of time they were sex workers. A lot of time they were really poor people that he would give like a couple coins to, and then they would like, you know, pose for him. But people still thought that was really weird. You know, they'd be like, "Oh, you're gonna go like stand in this guy's house and just like pretend to eat for an hour, 3 hours, and he's gonna paint you." Like people thought that was really strange.
Kind of a bit strange.
Yeah. So he tried to master some things. He struggled to paint perspectives. He bought this like frame to help him do perspectives. Like he wasn't like perfect at really anything because he was just so like kind of overwhelming in general. He met a sex worker named Cien, and she was pregnant when he met her. And he, fell in love with her, thought they'd have a family together, and he like loved her very passionately, even though she was gross.
How do
So
we
Cien
know?
we have drawings of her. We know about her life. Sandra was gross. She
How
was
do you spell
just
CM?
Sien. She was just riddled with STDs. And she was pregnant and she like, was missing her teeth, was
She looks like a
like,
witch.
yeah, she's not doing great. And of course, he gets gonorrhea. So it's actually like really bad. And they're both in the hospital at the same time while Sienna is having her baby and Vincent is being treated for gonorrhea, which I don't know the details, but I did learn in the book they tried to like get rid of it by inserting bigger and bigger catheters into him until it like flushed out. Sounds fucking terrible. And his dad came to visit him during this time and was like, dude, you have to stop talking to this woman. Like, you have to get out of this. And Vincent was like, no, I love her. I'm going to go back to her as soon as I get out of here. Whatever. Continues to be supported by Theo. His family, like, kind of threatens to take over and, like, put him under conservativeship and be like, you have to, you can't take care of yourself. But he insists that he's okay. And this whole time he's kind of been drawing and now he wants to paint. So he's starting to get into painting and he's starting to get more money from his brother and he's still with Cien. He thinks of himself as like Robinson Crusoe, like by himself on this island of passion that like no one understands. And he's always like, I'm about to make something that you can sell. I'm like this close to making something that everybody will want to buy. Everybody just be patient with me. The consequences will be dire if you're not. He'd rather die than quit. Like all those things. He still really thinks he can do this. And in the book that I read, this is where they say he starts waving the red flag of mental instability because he's like even more losing it than before.
I'm gonna go on a limb here. I
Do.
will say this might be a bit of a shock. I am not like a very artsy person. I don't care about art that much. I don't know what look. I just know what looks good to me. I don't really. I will say like I'm looking at his paintings and the thick brushstroke line work stuff that he does. Like it is objectively really really cool and awesome. And also, his family's right. He is unstable. He should have been locked up. He should have had conservatorship. Like when a pregnant prostitute comes knocking on your door and you're like, "I want to be your baby," it's like somebody get this guy help. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's like if any of our brothers did that, you'd be like, no, 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 no,
It's
no.
like we used to make Christmas cards at home and like make mama cake for her like, and
Yeah.
now you got like this woman pregnant and you have gonorrhea and we don't know like it's just what are you doing? We just
Yeah.
come from
Oh,
it's not
totally.
like it's not an indictment on her or whatever. It's like we all come from different walks of life. Like there's like sometimes it's okay if there's no overlap.
Yes. Totally. And you would also tell your brother to cut this out
Yeah.
if asked. Exactly. So I mean, this is such a long story. There's so many things, but eventually he's living in Trenton with his brother. He leaves Cien. Cien's story ends later, but she eventually throws herself into a river and dies by suicide. So her life is continues to be awful and gross for until it's over. And so he lives with his brother for a little bit. His brother has a mistress and he wants them to like all live together. He's like, we can live together. Like he wants his family unit back that he remembers when he was younger. But Theo won't live with him at this point. His mom falls and he moves back to Belgium, to the Netherlands to take care of her. And he, got a patron, got a painting teacher. He ended up meeting a woman named Margot, and she was 43 and he was younger. So he must have been like 35 or 34 at this point, but she's like super in love with him. So she falls in love with Vincent, and she is a woman who's a daughter of a neighbor, and the neighbor died, and his three daughters live in the house alone. Like what have happened to Lizzie Borden and her sister? They lived in the
Yeah.
house alone. And her sisters are such bitches. They're like, you're too old to get married. You can't marry him. And like, yes, he's crazy and all the things, but like, give me a break. Like, you just like told her she can't get married, she can't be happy.
The
So poor
problem
Margot,
isn't that she's too old. The problem is that he's an unhinged maniac who has VD from prostitutes. Like, what? Am I the only one
100%.
missing this?
No, you're totally right. That's definitely a lie that history is told. They've been like, you're too old. They've been like, dude, that guy's dirty.
Yeah, that's the problem.
You're right. You're right. But his sisters were like, her sisters were like, are you pregnant? Like, what the hell? And she's like, no, I just love him. And they're like, no, absolutely not. So she meets him in a field in like the middle of the night and she's like, I love you so much, I don't know what to do. And then she faints because she had taken strychnine to try to kill herself. He made her throw up, took her to the doctor, and just felt terrible after that. But he eventually did leave, and they did not get married. But she's maybe the only person who really did love him, like unconditionally. Maybe that one
Well,
woman.
that's sad then, I guess.
It's all sad. So he has all these relationships. He has this like beautiful imagination. It's 1885. He's still at home, but he's sad. He's taking care of his mother after her injury. She fell. And Theo is still in Paris. And he's like, he tells Vincent makes him think of old people who think their youth was better. He's like, you're acting like we had this idyllic childhood you have to go back to. Eventually, he's still with his parents, and his dad dies. So his dad's last day, he goes out and repairs some fences, does a long walk in the snow home, and then later, after he should have been home, a maid hears a sound on the door, opens up the door, and the dad has leaned against the door. He's had a massive stroke and he's dead. So he made it all the way home, like in the snow by himself, but then died at the end. Which reminds me of my great grandpa who went to the doctor one day and the doctor said, you're doing great. You're absolutely perfect. He went home and chopped some wood and then had a heart attack and died. Like,
Jeez.
it happens like both fast. So now his sister Anna is such a bitch and she's like, you killed dad. Like, it's your fault that he's dead because you're here and you're stressing him the fuck out. And so he's feels terrible. He's with his parents. He doesn't know what to do. He is acting weird. His brother is like, you have to sell some stuff. What do we do? He's so close. And so he makes this lithograph, like you were saying. So he learns how to like do this new form of art where you can like quickly reproduce stuff, these lithographs. And he does one called the Potato Eaters. And
Oh
it's
yeah, I'm looking at
really
that
good.
right now.
Yeah, so it's like a family eating, and he was obsessed with like the peasantry and like poor people and their lives, and people saw it and they were like, "What is this? It's weird. Like, where are their
It's
organs?
dark.
Like, it's
It's
dark
very
as
dark. Like this is not like I'm gonna look at this and feel jolly and merry. I'm not gonna put this in my living room, basically, type of a
yeah,
painting.
totally." And it ends up in someone's living room later in the story. But at this
Oh
point,
yeah.
people are like, "This is weird. Like, we don't know what it is." So nothing sells. He's pretending that like everything is okay, but nothing is going well. He moves to Antwerp, and he also now this is where he can track syphilis. So it's just like again, tons of STDs.
Yes.
So the medicine for syphilis was mercury,
Oof.
which has its own problems. So it would make you crazy, obviously. Like, like the Mad Hatter, like
Yeah.
because like hatters would be mad because of the mercury. Do you
Yeah.
remember that? So like that, and then it made you lose your hair. It made you spit a lot because like the mercury, I don't know, whatever. So he would like his hair was falling out, his teeth were falling out, he had sores in his mouth. Like he was just like not good. And he was trying to spend all of his money on like getting models so he could start painting them. And he was like learning how to paint, taking classes, and just was like never working out. For whatever reason, things start looking up and he moves to Paris to be with Theo. And he gets wooden dentures, he starts eating, he starts dressing nice, spends a few months at school, but it doesn't work. Like he goes to school where there's like the teacher is like, okay, today we're gonna paint pears, like a still life. And everybody else is like, I'm gonna paint normal. And Vincent is like covered in paint. There's paint dripping down his arms. He's like slapping paint on the thing. He's like talking to himself, all these things, and people just like don't get it. They can't handle it. And they're like, he can't do it. So he doesn't stay in school very long. And then Theo meets a woman who's going to be really important later named Johanna Gesnia. And he is like, he met her in Holland. He's like, I love her. He goes, asks her to marry him. She's like, I don't know you. Like, what are you talking about? So she like turns him down, and Theo goes back to Paris, very, very heartbroken. So her name's Johanna. We're gonna call her Yo, even though spelled Joe, but pronounced Yo, which is super cute.
Is that really what
So
people called her?
yeah, Yo, because
Oh wow.
Johanna,
Okay.
they're
Yeah.
called Joe. It's called her Yo. So Theo is starting to get sick as well because Theo was also riddled with STDs. So
I'm not. I'm so okay. Sorry. I'm not reacting anymore. I get it.
everybody has syphilis, everybody
Disgusting.
has
Got it.
gonorrhea. It's fucking awful. So I don't even know what those things do to you, but I imagine it's awful.
But it's
So
like, but it's
Theo,
like, but it's like you know the source. Why do you keep going back to the source? That's what caves my head in. Like, anyways,
but like emotionally, he keeps going back to the source of the things that hurt him, you know? So it's like, just,
it's true.
I don't
Yeah,
know,
it's a yeah. You're right.
the whole thing. So Theo's starting to get tired of Vincent. They're living together, which was been Vincent's dream to live with his brother, but it's not working out. Vincent's obsessed with like this madam at this cafe called the Cafe Tambourine. He's fucking that up. He's fucking up every relationship that he's in. And Theo is actually now in charge of buying all the impressionists and selling it. So like he's one of the reasons that Impressionism is even such a big deal is because he was in charge of buying it for the store and selling it. This is like after they were like the avant-garde thing and now they're like the
Yeah.
mainstream. Vincent is still not selling. Theo sells none of his work. He is doing some cool things, some things that I didn't know that he was doing. Like he became obsessed with Japanese art. So some like Japanese inspired things that Vincent van Gogh did. He would draw, like he would copy Japanese paintings and then draw borders and just put like gibberish Japanese symbols around it because he like didn't speak Japanese or Japanese, but he would like try to like learn from that. So a lot of like these like deep colors come from that art. In February 1888, he leaves Paris. He leaves living with his brother, which was his dream, because he does it for Theo's health. Because Theo is like getting sick from syphilis, like super sick, and can't handle having Vincent around. It's just too much. So he leaves and he goes to his town in France called Arles, Arles, Arles. This is where a ton of stuff happens. So Arles is a place where Vincent paints his most known works of art. He goes to this town. It's like a beautiful old town. It has Roman ruins. It has like Renaissance ruins. It has like so much history. It was something where like, the Romans went through it to get to the rest of Europe. It's just like a beautiful, beautiful place. And he rents this house and it is yellow and it is called the Yellow House. And that is where he does a lot of his work that you may have heard of. One thing he says during this time is he says, I use color to express myself forcefully. So he's like really painting a lot. Oil paints are new at this time too, so it's like a whole thing. He spends a lot of time in late nights in a cafe. He stays in a room. He calls it a free love hotel. Obviously, we know what that cafe is, but it's like a lovely thought to be like, oh, like we're out late at night with like artists and people that kind of don't care. This is his opportunity to start over, you know? So he's like, who can I have come here with me and like actually do art with me? So he asks another painter named Paul Gauguin to come live with him and
Sounds
takes him.
familiar.
It sounds familiar. So look it up. So Gauguin had spent a lot of time traveling the world. He'd just been in South America and he paints a lot of like native people. So there's a whole thing about like the cultural appropriation of Gauguin painting these native people and all of that. But he paints like a lot of things. His colors are very deep, but they're also very like matte, where Vincent's are very like shiny.
Yeah.
But Gauguin is older. He's 40. So he's like a little older than everybody else. He's married, but his wife, he doesn't give a shit. His wife lives somewhere else. And people fucking love him. Like he's really charming and people just like being around him where they do not like being around Vincent. And also Vincent is starting to get older and he can no longer have sex because of the STDs. So that's
Fucking
like a big thing.
absolutely ridiculous. But like, you know what? I think like every human in their life has like a counter, and that counter takes down how many sex workers you can hook up with, and he just hit his limit,
Like at
and
15. I
it
mean,
sounds like it was a lot more than 15,
no,
but
no, no. At 15 years old, I mean, like
at
he
15 years old,
went way
yes.
over. Yeah. No, I mean, yes, that was bad. He shouldn't, it ruined his body for sure. Theo was giving Gauguin money also and Vincent money to be like a patron. So now he's like, let's live together. It's going to be wonderful. It's going to be like this beautiful place. And they move into the yellow house.
Wait,
Gauguin is like,
I'm gonna counter your argument because I'm actually looking at Gauguin's art. how is this misappropriation? This is like lovely, lovely, like this, like
I
these
don't
people are
I don't
not depicted in like a bad way at all. This is actually very
100%. And I
beautiful.
don't know. I didn't that's like one of the last things I read and I don't know anything about it. I can talk about Gauguin later, but I don't know.
Cool. All right.
But I just wanted to bring that up because it's like in the news. But also like if you look up like a photo of Gauguin, he doesn't scream super sexy to me. But people loved him.
Oh no, it's the
I don't know
times were
why.
different.
But, like he has a ton of stories, maybe they're exaggerations. Who cares? People like love being around Gauguin, so they'll be like, "Oh, I'll pose for you, Gauguin," and then they'll like, go to the house and be like, "Oh fuck, Vincent lives here too," And then like he'll paint a picture of someone, and Vincent will paint a picture of the same person at the same time, but that person's hand will be in front of their face because they don't want Vincent to look at them
Oh wow.
because they just like don't like him. Another thing for I wrote this must have been in the book, or he has hypnotic sensuality. Don't know why, but his stuff is like really, really selling. But they also are like they're battling in their personalities. Gauguin is very slow, very like specific with his painting. Vincent obviously is not. Vincent spends all their money on like random things. Gauguin is like, we need to have a budget. Like we need to clean. Like you can't live like this. And Vincent just like can't do it. But at the same time, Gauguin's starting to get praise and Theo's selling his stuff, which fucking sucks because it's like, oh, you sell his stuff and not mine.
Yeah.
And she's like super upset about it. But he's like pretending this isn't happening. He's trying to rent more rooms in the yellow house, like build his commune. It's just him and Gauguin. Gauguin's trying to leave. He's like, I gotta get out of here. So he's like writing letters to people being like, I have to get out of this space. Like I just came to live with this guy, but he's crazy. I gotta go. On December 23rd, 1888, Gauguin goes for a walk, and Vincent is like, he's leaving. Like I don't know what to do. He's leaving me. And there in that time there'd been like a murder, which I did not look up, but there's like a murderer in France that everybody was like worried about. And there was a paper, and the paper said the murderer has fled. So it was like this murderer is out in the world. So this newspaper clipping, Vincent follows Gauguin as he goes through this walk, hands him this newspaper clipping that says the murderer has fled, and then he runs back home. And Gauguin is just like, okay. And Gauguin goes off like onto his night. That's when Vincent goes to a bar. He's drinking absinthe. He's fucked up. He's overwhelmed with everything. He's being rejected again and again. Theo has actually gotten Yo to marry him. So Theo's about to get married. He sees Gauguin's room is empty. He's like, he's gone. I'm all alone. And that's when he cuts off his ear.
Wow. That's what did it?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So he's like, I have to do something grand to like hurt myself,
Dude,
to like
he's like an abuser. He's an
suffer.
abusive relationship. He's like a gaslighter. It's like you made me do this. You made me do it. It's
Mm-hmm.
like one of those things.
So I'm going to show you it, knowing this is the visual part of this podcast. So he takes his ear, I'm moving my headphone. He pulls it out by the earlobe and takes a straight razor, and cuts it up like this. So he
So you
cuts
took the whole thing off.
the whole thing off. Then he's bleeding profusely, and he wraps it up. He wraps his head, and he wraps up the ear in like paper or whatever, and he goes out to try to find Gauguin. And he's like, where can I find him? And he goes to a brothel where he knows Gauguin is, but they won't let him in. They're like, you're bleeding. You're crazy. You can't come
It's
in.
like Gauguin's like, dude, this is what I'm talking about.
Exactly. Like, do you
This
see
is
what this
what I'm
guy's doing?
talking about. Like,
100%. So he hands his ear to like the receptionist at the brothel and says, remember me, and goes back home. So when they say like the thing that I had heard was that he like gave his ear to a sex worker, but he didn't. He gave his ear to a sex worker at the brothel because he was trying to find Gauguin to be like, look what you made me do. Don't you love me?
dude, I don't blame everyone for thinking this guy's a fucking weirdo. Like, this is like, yeah. But again, his brain's riddled with fucking syphilis, like in mercury poison. It's just like, so I can okay. So far, I assume there's autism, ADHD involved. There's probably going to be like a little bit of something else mixed in there as
Mm-hmm.
well as part of the cocktail. But even worse than that, his VD is eating holes in his brain, and then that's being filled in with mercury poisoning. And it's just like all bad. It's all not.
It's all bad. 100%. Now he has to go to a mental institution, like to an asylum. Like he has to. And Theo comes to visit him. He only stays a day. He takes all of his paintings back to Paris and kind of leaves him in this institution where Vincent like yells in his PJ, he's in his pajamas yelling the whole time. Like people will wake up and he's in bed with them. Like, he's just like doing weird stuff. You'd be like, dude, you can't be in bed with me.
Dude, this has to be like a comedy movie. Vincent. I mean, I know it's sad. It's sad because it's mental illness. You shouldn't be laughing at people that are suffering. I get it. But it's also like it's such a crazy. He's such a crazy historical figure, and like Vincent van Gogh was in my bed,
Yeah.
screaming at me with his ear bleeding all over my chest. Like it's
You'd
just
be like,
like
this crazy fucking artist was like in my bed again. What the hell?
ludicrous.
Ludicrous. So he he's in the hospital. He leaves for a little bit and goes back to the Yellow House in Arles, but the people, 30 of his neighbors, signed a petition to have him go back. They're like, we don't want him here. Put him back. So he goes back because he was like walking around drunk, just like doing weird stuff. He couldn't budget. He couldn't do anything. He's in and out of the hospital. Theo gets married to Yo, and they're blissfully happy as far as everyone knows. Vincent is on his way to go back to Paris to live near Theo and Yo, but then he's like, in like a moment of clarity, he's like, no, I gotta go back to the institution. So he goes back to the institution
Good for
because
him.
he's like, I don't want to hurt you. And I don't want to hurt your new life that you have. So he goes back. Theo takes all of his art, including sunflowers. Like when Vincent went to finally pack the Yellow House, it had been flooded. Everything was like kind of moldy. So a lot of his work he had to throw away, but a lot of it was like some of the stuff that we know today, like the sunflowers and the really famous things. The potato eaters were in there as well. So he sends that all back to Paris with Theo. And then also just to note, on June 25th, 1944, an Allied campaign to destroy the bridges over the Rhone River bombed the area and the Yellow House was destroyed. So
Is
you
there,
could no longer go there.
are you gonna get to like the most famous painting?
Yes,
Okay,
I'm coming up to it.
sorry.
It's happening really soon. Now Vincent is in a beautiful asylum in the mountains of France. And this is when they discover that this is what he has. He has epilepsy. He has latent epilepsy, which means he doesn't have physical seizures, but they happen in his brain. It causes him to have anger and mood swings and to work furiously and have exaggerated activity. It's like an epileptic fury that's like only mental and doesn't really come out in like the physical shaking that you think of like a seizure, but it's happening in his brain. That's a lot of what's happening to him. The things he's seeing are like all the things in his brain, like this fire that like other people don't see.
Okay.
That's why he's so like, besides other things, I'm sure the ADHD, all the gonorrhea, the syphilis, the mercury poisoning, but he also has epilepsy, which makes sense because there's actually a lot of epilepsy in his family. He has an uncle who's epileptic, and it totally syncs with what he does because like if you're having this like latent epileptic seizure that's in your mind, you become totally manic, you forget what you're doing, and then later you have like serious, serious remorse. And that's what happens to him all the time. So in this asylum in France is where he does paint A Starry Night. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, I also want to point out that late stage syphilis also causes seizures and epilepsy. So
Could be that
let's
too.
as we try to like paint brush over, these are not congenital defects the man was born with. He fucked his way into epilepsy is what happened.
It's also in his family, so I don't know. It could be both.
Sure, sure.
Fine,
Yes, I
we're
was
not
talking.
doctors.
Yes, we are not doctors. We're not doctors.
Go get
Uh,
tested. Be careful, everyone
I
out there.
was thinking about Starry Night.
Vincent, as I've said, didn't paint from memory or from his imagination. He painted from looking at things. That's why he was like obsessed with having models, except obsessed with having people actually there when he drew them. But A Starry Night, he would stand in his room in his with barred windows, looking out at the night all night long, looking at the stars. And then in the morning, they would let him go down into a studio to paint by day, and that's how he painted A Starry Night, which is like the only thing he ever painted from memory and from his imagination. So the town that's in A Starry Night is sort of like there was a town that he could have seen from his room. It's not that town, but it's like similar, and they made it a lot smaller, more quaint. And then on the left, there's obviously like the big cypress trees, and he could have seen those from his bedroom window as well.
Yeah,
So
but
that
he
was like
should
the
have done
view from there.
more. He should have done more from memory because that one's like I don't know. That's obviously the best one. I think.
Well, I think also that's so interesting because it's like people were telling him you have to like go to school and like learn these like concepts of art, and he was like yes, but he would try it and he couldn't do it, so he was like kind of forcing himself to like tone it down for everybody else, you know. But when he was like I'm just gonna go ahead and do it, then he makes A Starry Night.
Wow. Yeah.
which I've seen. It's in the MoMA in New York City.
I
So
saw that. Yeah.
lovely. Which is where I got
Is it
engaged. It was
big?
real cute. Yes.
It's pretty
It's not
big.
huge, but it's not like small.
Bigger than Mona Lisa.
Yes, it's bigger than the Mona Lisa.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is the first time he's ever done that. It's like, maybe potentially this like firework of electrical impulses in his brain. Who knows? All these things. But he's painting Starry Night. He's doing these artistic things, but also he's like eating his paint and drinking kerosene from the lamps. So it's not great. So they're going to be like, you can't paint anymore. You're not going to have, you can't have sharp objects because you're starting to go crazy. People started to see his sunflower paintings and kind of like them now. There's an article about him in the paper, and people started to be like, ooh, isn't it interesting that this artist is institutionalized? You know, like, I don't know, it's kind of cool. So they started to like do that, which is like super unfair that like people are pay attention to him once he'd already been like hospitalized for his problems. So Theo and Yo have a baby, and they name their baby Vincent van Gogh.
Oh, that's cute.
Who's another one? So the baby Vincent, and Vincent hasn't met Yo yet, but he like they write letters. She's very nice to him. When she meets him for the first time, she's like, he looks great. He looks healthy. Like he's not what I expected. Like he looks fine. Actually, Theo looks worse, because of his syphilis, but whatever. Yo actually did not get syphilis, so lucky duck on that one. There's like piles and piles of art around them. He's sending it to Theo like frantically. He gets out of the institution and he goes to a town that I absolutely cannot pronounce. It's Auvers-sur-Oise.
Why is he
A
sending? Is it because his art was finally being recognized and valuable, and he's trying to monetize?
No, I mean that's what he always wanted, but he's just like producing a lot at this point. So they let him out of the institution for whatever reason, and he goes to this small town and he's painting a lot. He's looking at gardens. He's asking Theo and Yo to come back and live with him. He's like, we could be a family. We gotta live here. We could have this garden. They do come and they bring the baby, and he like shows the baby the yard. He's like, look how lovely it could be. Like he's like, I'm feeling better. Like he's all accounts, he thinks he's feeling better. And so on July 27th, 1890, Vincent went out to paint in the fields just like he always did. He wore his little hat, he brought his easel, he brought his paints, he walked up to the field. Hours later, he came home after walking like a mile, like literally up a hill, like up a cliff to get back home. He is walking home. The people in town see him. His jacket is buttoned and he's limping. His landlord looks at him and says, like, Vincent, what happened? And he says, I wounded myself, and opens up his jacket and he has a bullet hole in his ribs. People then, forever, were like, he died by suicide. He shot himself. He died like 29 hours later. It was like super painful, like super. Oh, he didn't shoot himself in the head or like the heart. It was like in his ribs, like a really weird spot. And there's all of these things that are like, well, he had talked about suicide before. He was very like he was eating the paint, he was drinking the kerosene. But when he talked about suicide, he would talk about it as like drowning or like he never mentioned guns. There weren't really guns around at this time. They were very, very rare. The official story was that he shot himself and he died a few days later. And he actually said, like, I wounded myself. And Theo came to be with him and he said, Theo, let me die. This is where I want to die. Like this is fine. So he never like so they just assumed that he had killed himself and that was the end of Vincent van Gogh. But there's also in this, like I said, a
He
true
was with a
crime.
sex worker. He was with a sex worker.
No.
No?
Mm-mm.
Wow.
Here's what I think it was. And this is in the book and then like an article in Vanity Fair where the authors from the book talk about this. But it sounds like there were these fucking punk ass kids in town who would make fun of him all the time. And they would be like, they'd like put salt in his coffee, and they like found him masturbating in the woods and made fun of him because like obviously he was also masturbating syndrome. And
They're not wrong, Taylor. Like,
no, but they were mean to him. Like they were mean to him. They found someone they could bully and they bullied him. And the leader of this gang of bullies was named Rene Secretan, and he was 16 years old, but he fucking loved the old west of the United States. So he had this fake cowboy costume that he would wear to be like Buffalo Bill, Cody, Wild Bill. And he would wear this fake costume around and he would borrow a gun that the innkeeper had and pretend to be a cowboy. So it sounds like the kids accidentally shot him playing cowboy And Vincent didn't want them to get in trouble, so said that he had hurt himself.
Did they find a gun on Vincent?
No, they never found the gun. They found like a gun much later and never found his paint or any of the things he brought with him. So it sounds like the kids took it and threw it away. There was no suicide note. There was no painting stuff. Like, yes, he was depressed and yes, he was all these things, but he hadn't like said anything was going to happen, which also like that happens too. You know, people who seem very, very happy die by suicide and you don't know. But that is like a thing that is suspicious. So the authors of the book who what that I read, they in the, I don't know, 2000 somethings, they had a forensic person look at it, look at the autopsy reports, look at Vincent, look at everything. And the person who did it was named Dr. Vincent DeMaio, and he was actually the forensic analyst who worked on the George Zimmerman case. So he's like a
Uh,
real like forensic guy like that's in the news. And his conclusion is, quote, "It is my opinion that, in all medical probability, the wound incurred by Van Gogh was not self-inflicted. In other words, he did not shoot himself."
okay, I can take that
So it
guy's word for it.
sounds like it could have been an accident, but that's like a whole thing. He was super sick. Van Gogh was not going to live to be 100. You know, like he was going to die soon anyway. But he was always like, I will accept death when it comes, but I'm not going to like necessarily seek it out. And then when it happened, he was probably like, this checks out.
My only thing is like if you're trying to ascribe logic to it, the guy fucking slit his ear off and gave it to the receptionist of a brothel.
He's
You know what
he's
I mean?
not,
Like
yeah. He wasn't going to live much longer, you
what?
know?
Because your argument is like, what normal person would try and kill themselves by shooting them in the rib? Well, you're not dealing with a normal person.
Totally right. You're totally right. Yeah. But we just like we'll never know. There was always rumors around town. The rumor in town was that some boys killed him by accident, but they didn't say anything. They didn't want anybody to get in trouble. That boy ended up growing up and becoming kind of a like a famous, not famous, but like a politician in the area. So they just like didn't talk about it anymore. So like it could have happened. It could have been him. We'll never really know, but it's not
Yeah.
like black and white, you know? Theo, his brother, is obviously devastated that Vincent has passed, and he, is like, I want to make him famous. He feels very guilty. He's obsessed with it, but he can't do it because of the syphilis.
Of course.
So Theo actually dies 6 months later. He gets sent away to an asylum as well because his like mind is crazy with the syphilis, whatever it does. It's like not great. And he ends up dying like really young. Vincent was 37 when he died. Theo was 33. So he died pretty young. And he ended up being like a padded cell. Like, that's how crazy the syphilis made him. And then I mean the Van Gogh family, like, without going into all the things, like another brother, he died by suicide. Another sister was actually sent away for 40 years. She lived in an institution. So like the kids were not great,
Yeah.
like
Sounds
in
like.
general. But Vincent was the one who like did it by like, had this actual output from his mental instability. So Yo remarried and she made sure that Theo and Vincent were buried together, and that could have been sort of like the end of his legacy. But then, the question is, why do we know about him? Like, why would we ever know? He never sold anything in his life. He sold like one painting in his like last year of life. People ridiculed him. He was always like on the outskirts of everything. Like, there's no reason for us to know about him. But the reason we do is because of Yo, because she inherited everything. So she moved back to the Netherlands and made a like a boarding house. So she would have like people stay at her house. It was her and Vincent van Gogh, the kid, the baby, and she had the potato eaters in her living room. She had Starry Night in her dining room. She had
It's
this,
crazy.
yeah, these like she had
It's
they
like
were the,
$800 million worth of paintings between two
no, it's
paintings.
more. Like there's a kid, like a great grandson of Theo was talking about in one of the articles I read, like going through closets of Vincent's work, and he's like, it's tens of billions of dollars
It's
that we were going through,
crazy.
like in the closet, And the Van Gogh family actually doesn't own any original Van Gogh works anymore. They've all like donated it and sold it and given it so like the world can have it, is like their thing. But Yo had all this art. And she had all of the letters that Vincent wrote Theo. She had all the letters, all of the paper that Vincent kept. So she read it all. She was so smart. She would translate books from Dutch to English. She was like a teacher. She like knew a ton about linguistics. So she was like, people need to see this and they will understand it if they understand how tormented Vincent was in his mind. So she invented and was the first person to really say like the tortured artist. Like she was the person to like make it say like you have to look at his work in context of his life. So she did that. And one thing is like in the article that I read, like she would go to an important gallery with her baby. She's holding her baby. She's a woman. No one takes women seriously. And she would be like, you have to look at this. You have to read these letters. You have to look at this art. It is something. And so she would rent galleries. She became the person who championed this across Europe. She actually spent a couple years in America having people look at his work as well. In 1905, the largest Van Gogh exhibit that ever happened in the Netherlands. It had 484 of his works on display, and she rented the galleries, printed the posters, invited the people, bought bow ties for the staff. Her son Vincent wrote out the invitations. Like they made it happen.
Wow.
And then the question is like, why did Yo do that? She only was married to Theo for like less than 2 years, but her journals and her life, she wrote a journal when she was younger saying that I want to do something with my life that's important. Then it stopped. She said, I'm moving to Paris. And then 2 years later, she picked up her journals again. And the rest of her life was like, those 2 years in Paris were the best years of my life. And she was trying to like recreate and share that like huge artistic journey with the world. And so that was like her motivation was like, this is the thing that I want everybody to know. We know about him because of her, because of all the work that she did. Otherwise, we would never have known. And one thing that he wrote in a letter to Theo, which is a quote from another artist, but it's something that he felt very deeply, is he said, no results of my work would be more agreeable to me than that ordinary working men should hang such prints in their rooms or workplace, which is exactly what happened.
Yeah.
And I cut this out of my art book. I just framed the night cafe to hang up in my house.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
looking. I'm looking at his. So apparently, the estimated value of Starry Night is $100 million. It's crazy.
crazy.
It's one painting.
Hmm. Hmm.
Good for him.
And art's like whatever who knows, like what makes something stick and something doesn't, but his stuff is very special. It's very
Yeah.
special.
Again, like I'm not like an art guy, but like I look at
Yeah,
it and I'm like, man, it like evokes something.
yeah.
It's an
And for everyone,
intangible, but
for common people like you and me,
we're
you know.
commoners. I will say this. I will say that nobody in the world will ever convince me that Pablo Picasso was an artist or good at painting or good at his imagination or good at like it is it is like an acid trip on paper like is all it is. Like it is not good.
I have a couple thoughts. Um, Picasso was actually like a really good like technical painter. That he could paint things that were very like realistic, like Van Gogh could not. But he moved past that and was like, I could do this forever, but I don't want to. So he moved on to like the next thing, which was like Picasso's like stuff that we know
Okay,
for.
use that NYU degree. Tell me what give me like a realistic Pablo Picasso painting.
Oh, but look up his blue period. Picasso, blue period.
Thank you, NYU.
Thank you. That was $100,000. But this is when he was like, doing like starting to get weird, but like
Like it's
different things.
good, but it's not like, you look at a Da Vinci painting and you're like, whoa. Like, you
Right.
know what I mean?
But that's a different, but that had been done and it's different. I need more time to think about this, but yes. How about
Or like Van Gogh. Like Van Gogh's stuff wasn't detailed, but it's just like, wow, like the brush strokes, like weird. Like how
Mhm.
did you, now I'm so foolish because this entire time I thought it was just like a genius mind filled with curiosity and endeavored for truth and style and painting when really it was just a VD riddled brain full of holes filled with mercury poisoning. Like that's what it takes to do, I think, a good Van Gogh. But I don't know. Picasso, yeah, probably one of those guys who the sheer force of personality made him super super fascinating in real life,
Mhm.
and people just like were like, oh, then you must be a genius.
I'm
And
sure Picasso had STDs. I don't want to be a dick, but like, um, did you ever watch What We Do in the Shadows?
no.
So good. But there's one where they have Guernica is one of Picasso's most famous paintings, and it's like black and white, and it's after like the like a bombing of the town of Guernica in Spain, and it's like a horror thing, but it's weird. It's weird. If you don't like it, you wouldn't like it. But anyway, one of the vampires, she says that she's in it, and she calls him Pablo Picasso. It's really funny.
You get to that. You're the first person to ever recommend what we do in the shadows to me.
It's amazing.
Like
Watch
forever ago. Like we
It's so
were
good. Well,
still at
because
our last country.
even before the TV show that's like three
Yes.
seasons now, there's the movie from like 10, 15 years ago. It's so
The
good.
movie is the one that you recommended.
Oh my God,
Yeah.
it's amazing. I love it. I love it. Um, yeah, it's crazy. I feel like the thing that rocked me is I was like, oh, he cut his ear off for a woman, and he absolutely did not.
It wasn't a better reason. A woman would have made more sense.
No, but the answer is every relationship that Vincent van Gogh had was red flaggy and doomed. He couldn't do
Yeah.
it. He just like could not do it. And like that beautiful 2 minutes from Doctor Who, but you're just like, would he it'd be lovely to be able to tell him, you
Yeah.
know? Like it'd be nice to be like, people know who you are. I think that he'd like that.
No, that was a good one. That was a really good one. I am
Thanks.
gonna
It was
start
a
looking
lot. It was long.
up. This will be a long episode. Yeah, we're
Hmm.
pushing just shy of 2 hours,
Yeah, good for
but
us.
whatever. We had a lot to say. We got three stories in. I do like how, you know, when we consider our topics, you cover like this giant of creativity and insanity mixed with beauty and the movement. It's like you're like that guy in American Mind who like films the sack in the wind, you know?
Thank you.
And
No
then
one's ever thought I was
and,
deep.
and then I'm like, this guy's guts got fucking shot out like a cannon 30 feet.
Oh my God, it's so gross. I made some beautiful things on Mid-Journey of Van Gogh doing a diving bell that I'll share with you.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
Um,
Okay.
well, I have some listener mail,
Oh yeah, let's hear it.
which is not listener mail because zero people have emailed us, but it's friends who texted me.
That
So,
counts.
I have a couple. I have three stories. So Beth from North Carolina
I've heard
calls.
of her.
She called to tell us that when Pat Robertson died, Robert Pattinson was trending on Twitter because people were worried that he had died.
It's so good.
Which
The
is
internet never
amazing.
fails.
And I would be much sadder if that had happened.
I know.
Even though I don't think I've ever seen a Robert Pattinson movie, but still. And then George from New York, my friend George, reminded me about speaking of the Habsburgs, the last crown prince of Austria actually died in 2011 at the age of 98, and he was the one that was in a wheelchair. Do you remember that 30 Rock where Jenna almost marries the Habsburg?
No.
They do like a really great thing. I think it's the guy, I can't remember his name. Oh my God, the guy who plays Pee-wee Herman. And he's like in a wheelchair and like, but a prince. So it's really funny. It's like definitely watch that. And then my last one is Blair from Austin.
I've heard
You
of
also may
her.
know. She said that when you had mentioned, has anyone ever mixed whiskey and wine in a cocktail? She said that she used to work at a restaurant in Las Vegas and they would make sangria, but it was just a bottle of wine and a bottle of brandy and a ton of sugar, and people would get shit-faced.
God. So, I mean, man, I guess if you're trying to get shit faced, that's one way to do it.
Exactly. So, that was Blair's suggestion for, mixing whiskey and wine. Just put it together, add some fruit and some sugar. I'm sure that sangria is probably, no one would notice after the first half a glass. You'd be
That's
like,
true. That
this
is
is
true.
delicious.
Yeah. Yeah.
You'd be like eating the fruit with a fork.
Oh God, it's all just gonna taste like it might as well be nothing at that point.
Exactly. Your like mouth is numb and you can't remember where you parked.
Thank
Yeah.
you, listeners,
Thank you,
for
everyone.
writing in.
Yeah, for texting me personally, and I love it. I truly do love it. My friends are like, we love it. Thank you.
And
So nice.
soon, with our advertising that's coming out, everybody will love it as well. We're going to be world famous, and
Mhm.
yeah, that'll be our cross to bear, hopefully.
Yeah, strangers find us on the internet. We're at Doomed to Fail Pod. Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. Put everything up on YouTube so you can watch it there if that's what you do. But we're on all of the podcast platforms. Please like and subscribe. Tell your friends. This is our 26th episode, so we have tons of episodes to go back on. We talk about Russia a lot. Lots of true crime, lots of history. Please listen. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Cheers.
And I think I'll go ahead and cut it off there.
Okay.